To get certified, the land has to go through what's called a transition or conversion process. If it's been conventionally farmed, has to be 3 years without prohibited materials, so no synthetic pesticides, fertilizers, GMOs during that time. If it's coming out of CRP and there's a history of no chemical inputs, it can get certified in less time, but it still has to have that 3 years with no prohibited materials. There has to be records to base that on. And then the farmer chooses which agency. I mentioned there's 95 of them. They're all equal under the law. So the farmer has the right to choose who to get certified by. They have to set up a record-keeping system, and I'll go into that more. They fill out what's called an organic system plan, which is about a 15-page document that details everything they grow, everything they use, everything they plan to use, what conservation measures they use, have field maps and field history sheets. So it's quite a detailed document, but they complete that one time, submit that. That's the basis for the certification, the inspection. But then next year they don't have to fill out that. There's about a 4-page form, an update form. So it gets easier once you're in the system. They submit that with fees because it costs money to get certified. Then there's an inspection, and the certification agent makes a decision. The inspector is just like a journalist, a fact finder. I'd come to your farm, I listen to you, you answer questions, and I tell your story. I never make a decision. The inspector doesn't decide whether somebody's certified or not. They write a report that goes to the agency. They take all that information and then decide whether somebody meets the regulations or not. But then they have to be re-inspected and recertified annually to continue to sell organic products. And then they get a certificate like this. And the certifier can make a decision. I'm not going to go into great detail here. They could deny, or they could grant certification, or it's quite often to grant certification, but you need to fix a few things. You need to improve your record keeping is very typical. And so it's kind of conditional, and then those things get checked either within a month or next year's inspection, depending on what the issue is. I always like to read the legal definition of organic production. People still think, oh, there's 1,000 different definitions. No, well, in the U.S., under our regulation, there's one definition, and organic production is defined as a production system, and that's a key word. It's a systems approach to agriculture. So a production system that's managed to respond to site-specific conditions by integrating cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that foster cycling of resources, promote ecological balance, and conserve biodiversity. So it's quite a holistic, ecological definition here. To have in the Code of Federal Regulation, that's one of my favorite parts of U.S. law right there. It's a very all-encompassing definition there of organic production. And the challenge is, over time to make sure that the regulation, the certification system remains true to this ecological definition. So fundamental principles, it's really a non-toxic form of agriculture, and the basis is that a healthy soil, keeping the soil healthy, alive, the organisms in the soil alive, leads to healthy plants, then healthy animals, healthy people, and a healthy earth. And I'll show some research findings later on that confirm those basic principles. I said everybody has to fill out an organic system plan and tell what the preventative practices are and the planned inputs. Someone has to follow their plan and comply with the standards. So I mentioned that For processed products, there's what's called a national list. Well, there's part of that national list regulates what farmers can use and what livestock producers can use as well. So when somebody's certified, they can only use approved substances on that list, and they have to get re-inspected annually, like I already said. So the basic crop requirements, already mentioned, the land itself has to be free of prohibited materials for 36 months prior to harvest of that first organic crop. So it's not 36 calendar months or 3 years. It's really anticipate when you want to harvest that first organic crop and be able to document 36 months prior to that the land that it's being grown on is free of prohibited materials. So it's based on when the harvest of that first organic crop would be. And you have to document backwards, essentially. If a farm adjoins a conventional farm, there need to be measures taken to prevent contamination, drift, things like that. So farmers will often plant buffer zones, tree lines, or put up signs, organic farm, do not spray. Best thing, of course, is talking to the neighbors, having a good relationship, having respect for your organic practices. And in the state of Minnesota, pesticide drift is illegal whether it's hitting an organic farm or a conventional farm. Your products need to stay on your side of the fence. But at any rate, organic farmers do have some extra requirements where they have to identify where those risks would be and address them physically as well as in their farm plan. They also are required to maintain or improve the soil quality and to minimize erosion. So it's not just quit the chemicals, but you have to be taking care of the soil and preventing erosion as well. So somebody, it can't just be organic by neglect and the land eroding away, but there do need to be practices in place to protect the soil and build the soil, actually. And I mentioned that none of those organic products can contain GMOs. Well, the organic farmers themselves cannot use any genetically engineered products. So that includes any seeds like the BT corn or Roundup Ready soybeans. Those kind of things are not allowed. Any kind of genetically engineered planting stock, insecticides, legume inoculants. There are some genetically engineered rhizobial inoculants now, or any of the growth hormones like the RBST that's injected into dairy cows. That's not allowed either. And this just came out recently, late last year, a study about BT corn, which is corn that has been genetically engineered so that the toxic gene from a soil bacterium, Bacillus thuringiensis, has been removed and inserted into the corn plant. And that toxin is in every cell of those corn plants. And there was very little research done when that was approved. And now the research is starting to catch up. This was from both Indiana University and Notre Dame working together, looking at the pollen and plant residues from BT corn, and finding that those were going into streams, like in this area, but it was in Indiana, and killing. It is toxic to caddisfly larvae, high mortality and stunted growth when exposed to the BT corn pollen and crop residues. And that wasn't something that was anticipated. There's also documentation about monarch butterflies and black swallowtail butterflies because that BT toxins kills them. But now caddisfly is a major keystone species in aquatic ecosystems as a food source for numerous fish and other aquatic organisms. So just I just found that very alarming, actually, but interesting research that just came out. Back to the organic requirements after my little tirade there.